I was mid-conversation with the head of international partnerships when my phone buzzed. A text from my boss. "Congratulations, Rachel. We're promoting Lisa instead of you. She's a real team player." No punctuation, just that smug undertone I could hear even in silence. I glanced up from the screen and met his eyes across the gala hall. He was smiling, glass raised like he'd just delivered a toast rather than a blow. I didn't flinch, didn't blink. Instead, I slowly set down my champagne flute, excused myself from the conversation with a smile, and walked toward him, heels clicking over the marble like a countdown. When I reached him, I handed over a crisp cream envelope. "Thanks for the opportunity, boss," I said evenly. He took it, confused, still smiling. He had no idea what was inside. None of them did, because what they thought was a blindside was already part of my plan. I joined Easton and Lowe Consulting when I was 29, a pivot from a struggling tech startup that burned out before it ever took off. I thought I'd try something safer. Structure, stability, room to grow. 10 years later, I'd become their top strategic analyst. Client retention up 38% under my programs. Recovered 3 flailing contracts in Q1 alone. Built out a system for predictive forecasting that was already outperforming manual analysis by 400%. But none of that earned me the promotion I'd been promised. Apparently, what mattered more was smiling in the right meetings, attending weekend socials, and, God help me, baking brownies for the Friday culture hour. Lisa did all that. She also repeated my strategies, renamed them, and somehow got credited for innovation. But I stayed focused. Results, not politics. I thought merit would eventually win. I was wrong. 3 months before the gala, I had my annual review. I laid out everything: performance metrics, upcoming forecasts, new contract projections. My boss, Greg, barely looked up from his phone. "Rachel, you're strong," he said, "but you've got sharp edges. Lisa, she makes people feel good. She softens a room. She also lost us the Comtech contract," I said. He waved a hand. "People forget outcomes. They remember how you make them feel." That was the moment I knew I'd outgrown the room. I didn't argue. Instead, I started preparing. What no one knew was that for the past year, I'd been quietly developing a consulting model on the side, one that automated workflow alignment based on team behavioral patterns. Think, people analytics meets strategic delegation. It wasn't built on company time. I used my own servers, my own tools. And 2 months ago, the intellectual property was officially registered, under my name. At the same time, I'd been in talks with a small but rising firm based out of Boston. Arcona Strategies, nimble, data forward, and looking to scale. Our first coffee chat turned into weekly meetings. Then came the pilot test. It went better than even I expected. By the time Greg texted me at the gala, my exit was already mapped. The letter I handed him wasn't just a resignation. It included a performance report, a breakdown of every outcome I'd delivered, and a clause stating that I was withdrawing all consulting and strategic assets I'd provided, since none had been formalized in a contractual capacity. Translation: they'd been running on systems I built for free, and now they'd have to rebuild from scratch. If you've ever been told you were too much, too direct, or not quite right for leadership, just know, it's not about your ability. It's about their comfort. And when your excellence threatens their comfort, they choose comfort. But that doesn't mean you fold. It means you shift. You build something better, on your own terms. Because what I did next made the entire leadership team at Easton and Lowe wish they'd read the room a little better. Back at the gala, Greg opened the envelope while I walked away. I didn't turn to watch his face. I didn't need to. Because the next morning, Arcona made the announcement. "We're proud to welcome Rachel Lynn as our new partner, Strategy and Performance. Her systems are already changing the way we do business." The press release went live at 9 a.m. sharp. By 10:15, Greg's name was trending internally. By noon, I'd received 3 texts from colleagues I hadn't spoken to in months. "Did you plan that?" "Yes." Yes, I did. And I was just getting started. By Monday morning, the tone inside Easton and Lowe had shifted from smug to scrambled. Emails flew. Slack channels pulsed. And Lisa, freshly crowned with a title she didn't earn, floated into the Monday check-in like she'd just solved climate change. Hair glossy, latte in hand, smile 2 degrees too bright. "Let's make this a productive week," she chirped. Nobody answered, because half the team was already knee-deep in panic. Turns out, the system they were using to track workflows, the forecasting template that kept client deliverables ahead of schedule, all of it had been running on protocols I created, undocumented, self-maintained, never officially integrated. And now? It was gone. Why? Because I revoked access the moment my resignation was finalized. Not maliciously, not out of spite. Legally, ethically, strategically. It was mine. And I wasn't going to let them Frankenstein my work just so Lisa could slap her name on it. By Wednesday, the first client email landed. "Hey, just wondering, why haven't we received this week's forecast?" Then came another. "We're noticing some unusual delays. Everything all right on your end?" And another. "Who's handling Rachel's transition plan? We had deliverables based on her system." Lisa blinked, fumbled, delegated. "We're just realigning," she said, copying Greg and trying to sound in control. "You'll see improvements soon." But there was no alignment. There was no system. Just a mess of spreadsheets, missed handovers, and junior analysts trying to recreate tools they didn't understand. By Friday, 3 clients had called Greg directly. One escalated. Another suspended their upcoming renewal. The third quietly emailed me. Meanwhile, I was busy. Arcona's office in Boston wasn't some utopia, but the difference was obvious. Respect was baked into the culture. No one asked me to tone it down or soften my approach. They asked for results and trusted me to deliver them. In my second week, I pitched a cross-departmental deployment of my system. By the third, we were in rollout. By the fourth, our COO asked if I'd be willing to lead a licensing negotiation with a Fortune 100 prospect. "You've built something real," she said. "We don't need polish. We need precision." Imagine that. Being valued for what I actually do. Back at Easton and Lowe, Lisa was unraveling. Her big ideas, buzzwords, her leadership, a performance. She organized team bonding brunches and posted motivational quotes on the company's Slack like that could plug the gaping holes in operations. The analysts, my former team, were exhausted, working late, redoing basic tasks because no one had access to the automated triggers I'd built into the system. And Greg? He was too proud to admit he'd fumbled the bag, too slow to grasp that he'd bet the future of the department on the wrong person. One afternoon, a junior analyst named Priya messaged me privately. "Just wanted to say, you were the glue here. It's chaos now." I didn't gloat. I didn't respond with bitterness. I just thanked her. Then I got back to work. Because I had something better than revenge. I had momentum. Arcona's growth was accelerating. My system, now branded under a new name, was being tested in 3 different industries: healthcare, retail, manufacturing, each one showing significant performance boosts. And while Lisa was posting office selfies with just grind mode, I was signing licensing deals, in silence, with receipts. 2 weeks after I left, Greg scheduled a team pulse check meeting. Lisa opened with a shallow pep talk, followed by a slide deck so generic it could have been AI generated. She stumbled over basic KP is, mispronounced a client's name, blamed legacy systems for the dip in performance. One of the senior analysts coughed, loudly. Another muttered under their breath. "Funny, Rachel never blamed the system. She just fixed it." Greg didn't respond, because in that moment, even he knew. You can't fake capability forever. And charisma might buy you the job, but it can't do the job. 3 days later, Arcona's internal press release hit LinkedIn. Rachel Lynn leads successful deployment of adaptive systems tool across 5 enterprise clients, increasing productivity by 46% in Q1. Greg read it. Lisa read it. Hell, the whole industry read it. Even Priya messaged again. They saw it. You're trending in our department Slack. People are saying they didn't know how much was you. I smiled. Now they do. If you've ever watched someone get rewarded for mimicking what you built from scratch, this story's for you. Because in Chapter 3, Lisa's illusion finally collapses. And what happens next? Let's just say, Greg's about to make a desperate call. Too little. Way, way too late. The message came on a Tuesday morning, from a number I hadn't saved but immediately recognized. Greg E. Rachel, we need to talk. Today, if possible, please. No, hope you're well. No small talk. Just panic, thinly veiled informality. I didn't respond. Not immediately. I had back-to-back meetings, licensing projections to finalize, and an Arcona executive roundtable that afternoon. Greg could wait. So could Easton and Lowe. The truth was, I already knew why he was calling. The cracks had become too big to ignore. In just 3 weeks, 3 major clients had pulled out. Internally, project delays were stacking like a Jenga tower. The analysts were floundering without a system, running on manual spreadsheets and crossed fingers. Lisa? She was on damage control, hosting emergency morale Zooms and offering cookie-cutter pep talks about adapting through turbulence. One of my old teammates forwarded me a screenshot of her latest Slack message. Let's remember, pressure creates diamonds. The reply? Then why does everything feel like it's imploding? When I finally opened Greg's message later that night, I didn't reply with a yes or a no. I simply said, I have 15 minutes between 9:30 and 9:45 tomorrow. Your move. He called at 9:31. His voice was tight, the usual corporate calm replaced by something closer to desperation. Rachel, thank you for making time. I know things haven't played out the way we anticipated. Anticipated? I almost laughed. Instead, I leaned back in my chair and let the silence stretch. He continued, I'll be blunt. We're facing significant operational instability. The workflows you implemented were deeply integrated, more than we realized. Lisa hasn't been able to replicate the success. I raised an eyebrow, even though he couldn't see me. You mean she doesn't understand what she was handed? He hesitated. That's not how I'd phrase it, but yes. Of course it wasn't. Greg then pivoted to the pitch, the real reason for the call. Rachel, what you built, your IP, your system, was the backbone of our delivery model. We'd like to propose a licensing partnership. Bring the system back. We're prepared to offer compensation. I smiled. Slowly. You want to license what you dismissed as too tactical 6 months ago? Things evolve. Perspectives shift. I said. Is that why Lisa's reportedly crying in the break room every other day? Silence. Then, softer. Rachel, we made a mistake. I made a mistake. You were never just tactical. You were the engine. It was the first time he'd admitted it, but it wasn't satisfying. Not anymore. Because the moment you stop needing someone's validation is the same moment their regret means nothing. I told Greg I'd consider his proposal, that my legal team would review terms if they were serious. He thanked me like a drowning man offered a rope. But after the call, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt clear. They didn't want to celebrate my value. They just wanted to contain the damage. Big difference. Meanwhile, at Arcona, things were accelerating. The pilot program I launched was now in full adoption phase. Clients were reporting 40% faster implementation timelines and improved accuracy across multi-phase projects. Jared, the CEO, had already looped me into a global strategy call to discuss scaling the platform internationally. You're not just solving problems, he said. You're building the future. Real leadership, real vision, not lip service, the kind Greg never gave. The next week, an anonymous Reddit post from an insider at Easton and Lowe started gaining traction on industry boards. Senior leadership bet on image over substance. Now systems are breaking, morale is tanking, and the person who could have saved it? Gone. Corporate theater at its finest. By Thursday, a leaked internal memo confirmed what we already suspected. Lisa had stepped down. Personal reasons, the memo said. But insiders knew. The numbers didn't lie. The irony? Lisa posted a farewell selfie on LinkedIn that same day. Caption: "Growth often looks like goodbye." The comments were brutal. Growth for whom? Did you mean implosion? Hope Rachel's doing well. As for me, I kept building. Arcona's board greenlit our next expansion phase. I was invited to keynote a national strategy summit. And one evening, as I left the office, I passed our wall of framed innovations. They'd added a new plaque. LinOps TM, the system that changed everything. My name etched below. No politics, no approval committee, just results. If you've ever been called too focused or not a culture fit, just know, it's never about your worth. It's about their limits. And if they can't see what you bring to the table, build your own damn table. Because in Chapter 4, Greg tries again, but this time I bring the full picture into view. And when I tell him what it'll really cost to get me back, let's just say, it's not measured in dollars. The follow-up email landed on a Sunday night. Subject line: formal proposal, strategic licensing, plus return discussion. I stared at it for a full 10 seconds before clicking. Greg never did Sunday work unless his hands were on fire, which meant things at Easton and Lowe had gone from unstable to catastrophic. Inside was a clean PDF, their logo in the corner, my name on the first line. Rachel Lynn, former strategic lead, proposed reacquisition of IP, workflow optimization and forecasting system. It was official. They wanted my system back. Not leased, not referenced, owned, integrated, white-labeled. The price they offered? $1.6 million up front, plus a long-term consultancy retainer and a full buyout of LinOps. Generous on the surface. But the second I read non-disclosure and non-compete clause, I closed the document. They weren't buying partnership. They were buying silence. Control. Which meant they still didn't get it. Monday morning, I printed the proposal and brought it into Jared's office. He didn't even blink. "You're not considering it, are you?" he asked, sipping his espresso. "Not in the slightest," I said, setting it down on his desk. He looked it over briefly, smirking. "They still think this is about code." They always did. We both knew what they were really after. The system wasn't just a set of automations. It was logic, structure, insight. It was my brain, mapped. It couldn't be duplicated, and they were finally realizing that. "Want me to have our legal team send a reply?" Jared asked. I shook my head. "Number, this one's personal." I agreed to a meeting. On my terms. Neutral ground. A private business lounge overlooking the Chicago River, far from their sterile conference rooms and cold coffee. Greg showed up 10 minutes early. He looked older, like the past month had aged him in real time. He stood as I entered. "Rachel, thanks for agreeing to meet." "Let's get to it," I said, sitting across from him, unfolding the proposal I'd printed. He launched into a pitch. Familiar phrases dressed in new desperation. "This is an opportunity to heal old wounds, to bring you back into the fold. We'll support the system fully this time." I let him speak. Then I flipped the proposal around and slid it back across the table. "You want the system? You'll need more than money." His brow furrowed. "You want equity?" I shook my head. "No, Greg. I want an acknowledgement." He blinked. "Of what?" I leaned forward. "Of the fact that you ignored my work, dismissed my voice, and handed over my promotion to someone who couldn't manage a spreadsheet, let alone a team." He opened his mouth, but I didn't stop. "I submitted 3 proposals over 2 years. You declined them all. Not based on data, but because I didn't fit your mold. I didn't host team brunches. I didn't play social politics. I just delivered. He looked away. I continued. You didn't just undervalue me. You taught a team full of women and underrepresented professionals that showing up, exceeding expectations, and building quietly wasn't enough. That if they didn't perform like Lisa, they didn't belong. Silence stretched between us. Finally, Greg spoke. You're right. I didn't expect that. Not fully, but he wasn't finished. I've had to explain your absence in 4 board meetings. I've had to reassign clients who refuse to work with anyone but you. And I've lost good people. People who left because they saw what happened to you. Then let me be very clear, I said calmly. If you want access to what I built, you issue a public acknowledgement of the system's creator, by name. You retract the credit that was mistakenly assigned to Lisa. You publish it in your quarterly shareholder brief and in your client newsletter. His face paled. That's unprecedented. So was your dismissal of my work. He exhaled slowly, the weight of it settling. And if we agree? Then we talk about a limited-term license, nothing more. LinOps remains mine. My name remains on it. He nodded slowly. I'll need board approval. I know, I said. They'll say yes, because they're bleeding. Later that night, I got a message from Priya again. We just saw the internal doc you gave Greg. Word is you demanded public credit. We're all watching. And cheering. I smiled. It wasn't about revenge. It was about correction. About undoing the quiet erasure that happens when competence is passed over in favor of charisma. And if my push shifted the narrative for just one person still inside that building, then it was worth every second. The shareholder memo was published exactly 12 days after our meeting. Page 3, second column. We acknowledge that the systems formerly referred to as internal workflow innovations were originally conceived, developed, and implemented by Rachel Lynn, former senior strategy analyst. We regret the prior lack of attribution and extend our full credit and appreciation for her intellectual contributions. Beneath it, my name. In bold. In full. It wasn't an apology. Not exactly. But it was a confession. And more importantly, it was public. The industry noticed. Fast. That same week, I received 5 LinkedIn messages from strategy directors at rival firms. One wrote, I knew something was off. You were always the engine. Glad they finally admitted it. Another simply said, Queen behavior. But the one that hit hardest came from a name I hadn't seen in years. Sasha Ung, my mentor from my first job out of college. A woman who taught me how to read the politics under the data. Who once told me, keep the receipts. They'll come in handy. Just saw the shareholder note. I never doubted it. They're lucky you didn't sue. I smiled. She wasn't wrong, but I wasn't interested in dragging them through courtrooms. I didn't want headlines for a settlement. I wanted the truth. And now it was out. Back at Arcona, everything was scaling. The LinOps system was in final negotiations for global licensing to a major multinational. Our pilot in Southeast Asia reduced regional onboarding time by 61%. Jared offered me a new title, Executive Vice President, Global Innovation and Systems Intelligence. Not flashy, not performative, accurate. It came with a seat at the table, not because I lobbied for it, but because I built the structure the table needed to stand. 3 months later, I was invited to speak at the Women in Leadership Summit. They gave me the afternoon keynote, right after the Vice President of Strategy at none other than Easton and Lowe. Yes, Greg's replacement. I stood backstage as she delivered her polished slides and future-forward promises. I didn't feel bitter. I felt free. When my turn came, I walked up to a room of 800 professionals, many of them women who'd been told they were too much, too sharp, too focused on results. I didn't talk about my resume. I talked about the silence. The kind that happens when you do exceptional work and no one claps. The kind of silence that follows your ideas into meetings, only to have someone else present them louder, shinier, with a wink. I was told I was too focused on outcomes. I told them. Turns out that was the exact focus the industry needed. By the time I finished, the room was on its feet. And this time, the applause was mine. Earned, not gifted. Later that evening, as I left the event, a young analyst stopped me near the elevators. "You don't know me," she said, "but I followed your story. I used to think I had to shrink to be seen. You proved otherwise." Her voice cracked slightly, and I saw myself in her. In the quiet strength, the flicker of fire just beneath. I smiled. "You don't have to get louder. You just have to stop dimming." She nodded, and I walked away knowing something had shifted. Not just for me, for all of us. Easton and Lowe never fully recovered. Their client list shrank by 40% in 6 months. Recruitment slowed. And Lisa? She went quiet, deleted her girl boss posts. Rumor was she was consulting at a mid-sized firm in Ohio, trying to rebuild. As for Greg, he stepped down quietly after the board began asking too many questions he couldn't answer. Their house of cards collapsed. Not because I pushed it, but because I walked away with the blueprint and took the foundation with me. Now, I live in a brownstone in Lincoln Park. The framed patent for LinOps hangs beside a signed licensing agreement from a Fortune 50 partner. My email signature includes 3 words I never thought I'd see next to my name: founder, inventor, strategist. Not because someone allowed it, but because I claimed it.